Hi, friends. Welcome to the final episode of Season 2. Wow, what a ride it has been. This podcast has taught this old dog some new tricks. I launched the Urban Exodus podcast in November of 2020, and I can't believe what an evolution and revelation it has been. Before, I had all of these amazing stories in my head from my visits to people's homes, businesses, and farms. But my written features and interviews could never compare to people sharing their own journeys in their own words. I continue to do this work because it feeds me. It's my life's passion to share these stories, and the people that I've met through this project give me energy and hope for the future. I am so grateful to all of my guests and to all of you listening out there. But I have a favor to ask. I honestly can't keep this going without listener contributions and sponsors. This project has been a self-funded labor of love for over 8 years. I've never made a living from Urban Exodus, and every episode has a hard editing and streaming cost. That doesn't include the time it takes me to put an episode together, and I've spent hundreds of hours researching, writing questions, interviewing, editing, and making the final product the best it can be. I'm hoping to launch Season 3 in late September during the fall equinox, but I can't do it without your help. If this project is meaningful, please consider supporting my efforts. To date, I've only received 2 listener contributions, and honestly, both of them made me cry tears of joy. I don't want to stop doing this work, but I can't do it without the support of this community. The easiest way to contribute is to click the support button at the top of the Urban Exodus website and pledge any amount that you like. Or you can sponsor an episode of the podcast and receive a 20-second ad spot. Just click the podcast link on urbanexodus.com to learn more. Your contributions will keep this passion project running. I want anyone who feels unfulfilled by career or circumstance to know that they have options and alternatives. All of the work that I do through this project is to encourage people to believe in themselves and to work towards a better future for their community and for the planet. Thank you so much for helping me continue to do this work, and I hope you enjoy the final episode of Season 2. It's a good one.
Instead of just being like, it's all or nothing now, what can you spend 20 minutes a day doing that's forwarding your goals or that makes you happy? Because it's like life's too short. That's what this year is. It has been a reminder of, life is precious and you can't hide forever. And it's been helpful in terms of moving beyond the victim mindset and moving into like the proactive mindset.
A movement is underway of people abandoning the emotional, physical, and financial expenses of city living and crafting their own purpose, livelihoods, and joy in the rural reaches. The Urban Exodus podcast shares the wisdom, wit, and stories of those who decided to embark on the road less traveled to pursue their own interpretation of the good life. Small business owners, change makers, artists, farmers, and more, working towards building a better future for themselves and their fellow citizens. This podcast is for country dreamers, rural folk, and urban dwellers alike who want to feel more connected to the natural world and the purpose and choices in their lives. I'm Melissa Hessler. Welcome to the Urban Exodus. I'm really excited to invite you to my conversation with Simone Leon. Simone is a writer and film festival producer who's living in Camden, Maine. After attending film school, Simone was thrilled to land a job working for a major talent agency in Los Angeles. And while she loved the people that she worked with and the projects that she got to assist on, the traffic, long hours, stress, and pollution began to completely overwhelm her. Simone began dreaming of living a life on her own terms and moving to a place where nature was closer and where local food was plentiful and affordable. At only 26 years old, she left her sought-after career trajectory and moved across the country to work as a talent and location scout for a small creative workshop school. Even though it was a big pay cut, it was the perfect job to meet people and to become familiar with her new home of Midcoast Maine. So, Simone Leon, it is such a pleasure to have you on the podcast today. And honestly, I really owe this podcast to you. I kind of had thought about a podcast for a long time, but it wasn't really until I met with you that I was motivated to do it. So I'm excited to have you on as a guest, and I'm excited for you to get to share your story, which I just think is a really wonderful story of following your dreams. So first off, I'd love if you would share a little bit of your personal backstory.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thank you for saying that, Alyssa. I mean, you were a huge inspiration to me too. So I'm just like glad that I could have any part in this podcast and movement, because it's been really why I'm here and why I moved. And yeah, just a huge, huge inspiration. I'm 27 and I moved to a small town in Midcoast, Maine 2 years ago. I studied film in college and I worked as an assistant in the film industry for around 3 years after that, and kind of just wasn't happy in my life. I wanted something different, but I just didn't know what or how to do it, because I just didn't see those models for me. And I made, maybe some would think, an impulsive decision to kind of leave my life, leave my job and the career path I was on, to come out here where I didn't know anybody, but was just really, really drawn to this beautiful place, and needed to have some time to myself, some peace, a way to really kind of discover what I wanted to do with my life outside of sort of the path that had been given to me.
I think that that's interesting because, like you said, it's this path that we're kind of all instructed to go on. And so you studied film in college. So naturally you moved to Los Angeles, and, it's exciting. You actually get a job in the industry that you want to get in. So for a lot of people, that's a dream, right? But then the experience didn't really measure up to the expectation. Can you talk about what your life was like in Los Angeles and the things that weren't really serving you there?
It's funny because it's like, it was a hard time for me, but it was also a really amazing time because I got to work with a bunch of like creative people who I admired. And, half of the time I got to just read scripts or watch movies or do all the things that I was like really passionate about. And I think it was hard for me to reconcile with that, with all the feelings I was having that this wasn't right for me. This wasn't the way that I wanted to be working in film. And I think it was hard for me to admit that to myself for a while, just because I've always been super ambitious, and we're not really always prepared for like what life is going to be like when we leave school, because there's a lot of like transitions emotionally and like just physically in life that I just never felt totally prepared for. And I think I was, working for other people, not, working crazy hours, super, super stressed out all the time, not living a very healthy life. And I wasn't happy. And I sort of felt like I didn't know how to live my life on someone else's terms. And it took a long time for me to admit that to myself. I was suffering like various health problems, really lots of anxiety, lots of kind of like stress related physical problems. And I knew that something wasn't right. And I was always very drawn to nature and drawn to living in the country, just because I felt like I needed to not be in such like a cutthroat world anymore. I was having a hard time kind of living on life on my terms. And it was like, and there was a little bit of a feeling of like the wool being pulled from my eyes. Like, is this what the rest of my life is going to look like? And I just didn't feel like I fit in to that world of sort of like climbing the ladder, working for someone else, going to an office every day, living in kind of like stress and fear of what other people thought of me and my reputation. It just didn't feel right to me.
So how did you find the courage to take that risk and make this major life change? How many months did it take you to decide, or did you write lists, or how did you find enough courage to do it?
Maybe it took me like a year and a half to actually like muster up the courage to make real moves to doing it. I told myself I would give it another year. I would give myself another year, and if I still felt that way at the end of the year, then I would do something about it. It's funny. It's like I couldn't resist this urge in me to leave, to move to Maine. I sort of became like obsessed with Maine. I remember like I went to the library and I checked out every single book that had Maine in the title, and they thought I was crazy. I just became totally obsessed with like wanting to be in a different place, to sort of feel at peace. And it was hard to find the courage. And I think I was really, really afraid for a while to share my desire to do this with anybody. I was afraid of what people were going to think of me. I was afraid that I would just like lose forever the relationships that I built with all the people that I worked with. And I didn't want people to think that I had given up. And I had a hard time disassociating my identity from my career path.
I don't know why there's that stigma associated with making a major life move and making a move that actually is much more healthy for you. Yeah. And I don't know why we associate that with giving up. I think it's just the way that we're programmed in our society to like keep these jobs that make us miserable and stay in places that make us miserable. And obviously some people can't get out of their current situations. But I think it was a big risk for you. And you were only 25 when you moved. And a lot of people that I have interviewed and photographed for this project are in their 30s or 40s. So they're a little bit further along. Maybe they've started their businesses on their own. What advice do you have for other younger people who are considering building a life and career path outside of the city?
It definitely is a challenge. I mean, maybe things are different now with more remote work being available, but I think I was so set on this place specifically that I wouldn't take no for an answer. And there aren't very many opportunities, especially in like a creative or like film related field up here, just because it's such a small town region. I did a lot of research beforehand and I visited a few times. I tried to connect with a couple of people and just network. I was doing all the things that are the right things to do in the city, but like maybe people here aren't used to being so just like aggressive, like, with applying for jobs and things. But I was just like, I was really passionate about this place. I would say for someone who isn't as tied down to like a specific town or region, just to do your research. There are places out there and really like think about to not just the physical kind of beauty or whatever draws you physically to a region, but also the culture, the community, because those things really, I mean, even just where we live in Maine now is so different for if we were to drive half an hour like south or half, inland or something. I think that can really change your experience of a place, like the people, the culture, and just the work opportunities there. You kind of have to be prepared that it might take a while for you to get your job at the place you want to get it. You might have to do work that you don't necessarily want to do. I think I had resolved, but before I left, I was like, if I have to work in a coffee shop or whatever, anything, I kind of resolved before I left, which I maybe don't recommend for everyone, but I had resolved. I was like, I will work any job just as long as I can be in this place that I want to be in. So I tried not to like expect too much that I would get the work that I wanted and work with the people I wanted. I was like, I just need to like solidify myself in the community a little bit more and get to know people and show people that like I'm for real and I really want to be here.
There's that idea of kind of proving yourself to a community too, right? I think especially when people come from away, they want to know that you're there for the long haul, because there are a lot of kind of temporaries or people that try on rural living and then it doesn't suit them and they leave. And so that commitment, I think it really helps you gain access to a community, closer access than you would have before.
And I was like so lucky too that when I came here, I just felt like everyone really welcomed me with open arms, and it felt so natural to just kind of get to know people and be introduced. Even though I went in here, I moved here, I didn't know anybody who lived here other than people who I had just kind of reached out to on my own, like after being interested in coming here. But it all depends. I mean, I'm sure there are people out there who want to move to a place because maybe their family is there or like maybe they grew up there. But as someone who was just like single-mindedly just kind of fell in love with this region, I just had this kind of passion and love of this place driving me here, even though on the outside, logically, seemingly, it made no sense what I was doing here.
So something that we've talked a lot about is this kind of real movement of climate change motivated relocations. And I know that that was definitely on your mind when you were looking at places to move to. Can you talk about what you researched before deciding on this particular community?
I love that living here, there's so many farmers. You could basically just eat food grown in Maine. It might be a little bit hard, but if you wanted to, you could get all your fruit, vegetables, meat, bread, everything grown here. And I just loved that about this place. In the city, I was struggling a lot with my health, I think just because I didn't really have enough time or money to properly take care of myself. And coming here, I was like so excited about the idea of just like supporting local farms and eating locally. But I also definitely did research best places to live in terms of climate change. Like Maine is actually, I just had read a few things that it was a great spot to live in terms of, severe weather. When oceans rise, we're kind of situated in an ideal spot for that. Funny enough, I think I would have come here anyways, but that is something that's becoming more and more real for people to really think about. My sister lives in Florida, and I know just like the hurricanes are getting worse there every year, and it kind of worries me, and I don't feel that same sense of like climate fear here in that way, but I did love the idea of getting to live in a place where people really, really valued nature, the environment, local food, and all that. You can tell that a lot of people who live here really see the importance in that and are willing to do things themselves and not necessarily need to rely on outside sources to feed them. There's a lot of like self-made, self-starter type people here.
This season of the Urban Exodus podcast is brought to you by Jake.art. Bring the beauty of the outdoors in. A new online art shop brought to you by Urban Exodus. Search our collection of affordable, high-quality fine art prints and illustrations by color or theme to find just the right work for your home or office. Or commission us to do a custom illustration or photograph of a loved one. Visit jake.art, that's JAKE.ART, or click the shop button on urbanexodus.com. So you left LA and you moved to Midcoast Maine and you got a job with a respected workshop school. Can you tell me what the career, lifestyle, and mindset transitions were like for you?
I actually feel really, really grateful and lucky that I got the job that I did when I moved here. I was basically sort of a locations and talent scout for this local college for their summer and fall workshops, where I would seek out actors, models, and locations where people could film and do photo shoots. And it was almost like the most perfect introduction to a new place, because my job was basically to meet a ton of new people and explore a ton of new locations. And so I was constantly, like, half the time was just driving around, finding cool new places to film, meeting business owners and actors and hiring models. So it was just like so ideal that I couldn't have even planned that. But I think when I first moved, I was just so ecstatic. Like, I can work for like 8 hours a day and like go out to dinner with my friends at night and not feel so stressed, or, not work through the weekends, even though I sometimes had to work on the weekends. But like, it was just this feeling of the pressure being off. And even though I was working really hard, it was like, if I messed up, it was okay. Like, like if I messed up, I wasn't going to and part of this was me just being an anxious person in my past work. But like, I was like, I'm not going to die if I mess up. I'm not going to be like blacklisted forever. Not that that was ever really the reality.
But the film industry is notoriously a pressure cooker. That was my first job out of college, and it was like 14-hour days, and you had to prove it all the time, and everything was on fire all the time. And so to have that shift, even though you're still working in film and in photography, but a slower mindset, a workshop, a learning institution, it must have just felt like, so much less pressure.
It was initial period of like just total elation and like feeling like I could finally breathe for the first time. And it was also just so nice to like that everyone was so friendly. And I had worked in a job that I was pretty isolated, didn't see a lot of people, and was a small company. And now I was at this job that was like, it was sort of like summer camp. I was constantly meeting new people. And I kind of realized that I thrive being around other people, which, this is why COVID has kind of like been hard on me too. But yeah, I was like going on weekend trips all the time, exploring, going to dinners, like meeting people. It was just like a totally different, even though I was working, it was like I was on vacation. I was living in the best place in the world. I loved what I was doing. I was having a great time. I like look back on that with a lot of nostalgia, but it was, yeah, I couldn't have planned it better myself, working in a place where my job was just to get to know the region in a weird way.
So you mentioned COVID, and I know that COVID has really impacted community and people's interactions with one another, with community being such an important factor of living in a small town. How have you been weathering this much more isolated time? Has it changed your perspective on small town living at all?
It kind of has, to be honest. And I think that's like a little bit, it's a little bit hard to talk about in a way, because moving here was such a big decision and I love it here so much. But it really, really made me realize that as beautiful as this place is, as great as the culture, as great as the food, as great as all of that is, for me, it really centers on my happiness really centers on like feeling like I am a part of a community. And like that was so much easier in 2019 when I moved here. And then when that got taken away, it was like, it's a little bit harder to feel so isolated when you don't have that same sense of community, because, everybody is just kind of grappling with the chaos of this year. And I really look forward to like very soon getting together with people again, kind of rebuilding that. And I guess I would say that too, is like, it really taught me that where you live does matter in terms of the physicality, the culture, all of those things, like I mentioned, but what gives a place that like staying power and that, really important sense of belonging are the people. And that's what I felt when I moved here. And that's what I loved about a small town is like in the city, you can just be an asshole to anybody on the street. And not that I was, but like other people, there's a little bit more of a chaos.
People are more on the up and up.
Yeah, there's road rage.
You're a weird person if you honk in Maine. So just remember that if you drive through our town.
I know people, like, I remember when I first got here, someone like, we pulled over to the side of the street I was with a friend and we pulled over to talk to someone. And then some lady was behind us, like honking. And then the girl I was with was just very calmly said, "Oh, she must be from away." And then just went back to talking to the other person. I was like, yeah, I get it.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love if you could tell the story of how we met and how we started working together.
It felt like serendipity and fate and magic in a way. I came across a couple of years ago, I think it was like maybe 2 years before I actually moved to Maine. I was on this trip, on a road trip up north to Washington, and I came across your book in a bookstore in Seattle. And I had been at that time really kind of like exploring of this, like, I want to move back east. I want to move to the country. I don't know how much longer I can do this. And I came across your book and it was like all of those things. It was just so inspiring to me. And like through your book, I found the Urban Exodus website, and pretty much almost every day from then I was like reading the stories, just so inspired, hearing you talk about this in your book, and also just the people that you interviewed talk about all these things that I was feeling, but I felt almost like no one around me, none of my friends were feeling that same way. I think I finally felt heard, and I felt validated in a way, like I can do this. I can make my own path, and I have to, because it was like I had no other choice. anyways, I'm digressing. When I came here, I reached out to you. I remember you were teaching a workshop at the school I was working at, and I just came up to you and just told you how much. Actually, before that, I remember you did a talk, and it was like, it's funny to talk to you this way because it was like seeing my hero. And I cried. I cried because I was like so moved.
Oh my gosh, you never told me that.
I know. I cried. I was like, I was too shy to talk to you then. So I at another moment, I finally got up the courage to talk to you, and just was like, if you ever need someone to work with you on this project, it inspired me so much. And yeah, I'm really glad that you didn't think I was a crazy person because of how much your work meant to me. But you invited me to come work with you, and yeah, the rest is history.
Well, I think it's interesting. I think it's when you are, I don't know, it validates your work. Urban Exodus has always been a passion project, and I've just done it because of exactly the story that you're saying right now. It's this like, I'm feeling extreme discontentment in my life, and there has to be something else. Like, I have to find something that feels right. And, for some people, that isn't moving to the country or like moving away from the city. That's finding like a purpose or life's purpose or a profession or something else, some other piece. But for me, it was really that move and what that did to me. And so it was just really amazing. I think that's why I've kept Urban Exodus going all these years, just hearing stories of people who like find it and then feel, you know what, I can do this. And I'm not the only one that feels this way. And it's really great to be able to connect with you in this way. You came to me and were like, hey, I really think that you should do a podcast. And I said, you know what, Simone, I've been thinking about that forever, but like, how the hell am I supposed to do that? And then you were like, oh, no problem. And then you put together like all of this research on podcasts. And you just really inspired me to keep pushing forward on something that I didn't know why I kept doing it, but I do know why. It is a passion. It is like something to tell people that they don't have to live the way that maybe the American dream or society tells them they have to live. And a lot of times that's kind of like your time is not your own. You're essentially owned by a company or business or corporation or whatever that you're working for. And there can be other ways out of that.
Absolutely. And like, I'm glad like that you've had to, like you've had people come up to you and say how much it means, Urban Exodus means to them, because, I think we've talked about this before too. Like, what is Urban Exodus? What does it mean? Does it mean moving to a small town? And yes, it can, but it can also, it's also sort of just like reclaiming your life and reclaiming your life's purpose and living life on your own terms. And for a lot of people, that means leaving the city and realizing that the lifestyle that kind of we're taught is the lifestyle that we need to live doesn't work for them. And just like knowing that means different things for different people. But it's sort of a message that we need to all hear. And, for myself as like someone who's just really ambitious and like wanting to do everything right, it was sort of exactly what I needed to hear, because it can be challenging to like find your own path when you're around people who, maybe you don't relate to, but you don't know why, or just living in a way that you don't relate to, but you don't know why. And just knowing that, there are people out there who can, through lots of hard work, and courage, have like built their own life on their own terms, which is challenging to kind of go against the grain, but sometimes it's like your only option.
There can be a real feeling of being an outsider when moving to a small town. And obviously you had a really excellent entry point through your job working for the workshops. What advice would you give to people considering small town living on ways to weave themselves into the fabric of their new community once they've arrived?
I would say hopefully we won't have to worry about COVID as much anymore, because I can imagine like, wow, how would you do that with like coronavirus? moving to a small town, I'd imagine it'd be really tough unless maybe you had kids and were having to like kind of take them to school and stuff. But I feel like if you know that, this is somewhere you want to live, I would say you should make like a concerted effort to try to get to know people, try to get to know your neighbors, put yourself in situations where you'll be meeting other people. It can also be like a snowball effect too. It's like once you maybe start meeting people your age or people who have similar interests as you, you'll kind of slowly start to get to know like more and more people, just because life in small towns is like very interconnected. And that's what's so beautiful about it. It is also somewhat challenging as an adult because you do kind of meet a lot of people through your job. And I don't know, I was really lucky to just have a job that required a lot of socializing. I think that it also just required me putting myself out there too, in a ways as like, I was sort of a shy person, so it was a challenge for me, but I knew that if I really wanted to like feel like I was a part, not just sort of plopped somewhere, like didn't just kind of like plop myself here and was living an isolated life. I mean, I think your book also I was taking a lot of lessons from your book.
You got to put yourself out there. You have to talk to people. Even if you're introverted, it'll make your experience so much better. And then you'll have people that have your back, because that's how small communities function. And have you noticed that you have friends of all ages now? Did you only have friends the same age as you in the city? How has that changed?
Yes, definitely in the city, only friends the same age as me. And it's funny because I was in a line of work where it's like we started and everybody was 22 or 23 and we were all kind of coming up together. But now it's definitely more friends of different ages. Surprisingly, like one of my fears moving here was that I wouldn't find any friends my own age, but thankfully like that didn't turn out to be true. But it's also like a part of beautiful thing of living in a small town is like making friends with lots of people no matter what their age. And also like, I guess that's also, a part of growing up too, is having friends, not friends that are just like your age, like in school, but just meeting people and relating to people for all different reasons, and not just because you had the same job or went to the same school, but just kind of like really connecting with people as people is another special part about living in a small town.
This episode is brought to you by Hessler Creative, a creative photography duo offering conceptualized brand content and in-person and online workshops. Hire us for elevated photos and videos to help your business rise above the noise and expand your customer reach. Or you can join us for an online or destination photography workshop. Explore new places, learn new techniques, and elevate your creative work. Learn more about our workshops and our commercial photography services by visiting HesslerCreative.com or click the collaborations button on urbanexodus.com. Social and environmental activism are very important to you. I'd love for you to give your advice to others who are trying to figure out how to get more involved and make an impact in these major problems that we're facing, but maybe they feel really overwhelmed and like they don't have the power to truly make real change in the world.
It can feel overwhelming when you just start to like recognize all the things that need to be changed in our world. And despite, I guess, what some of the culture is like, I think it's important to find what speaks to you and maybe focus on that and not try to do or be everything. My sort of passion for the environment came through my love of like food and farming and just learning about that and supporting farms and, trying to reduce my waste and plastic use. I almost feel like, I feel a little bit like an imposter answering this question, because I'm like, what do I do? Am I good enough? Am I a good enough like example of those things?
I think that actually making that conscious choice to change your life and to practice, as close to zero waste as possible, and now you've changed professions. Now you're working for a documentary film festival and institute, and really working to kind of, provide more information on major issues that are facing our world. So I think that, it is about kind of pursuing your passions, but also finding ways that those passions can do good, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I know, like, I've heard of like people saying like, whatever you do, whatever your profession is, like, try to find ways that you can be in service to others. It helps to think of things in that way too, to separate from yourself a little bit. I guess when you put it that way, I think, sometimes there's a lot of pressure to try to do everything or be everything at once. And my thought is like, find, what way that you can be of service in your position in life, and like whatever your resources are, whatever your profession is, or however which way you can like support making the world a better place. Do it in the way that makes sense to you. I don't know if that's good. I don't know if that's good advice. It takes a lot of the shame out of, not being good enough, I guess, maybe.
Well, and it also takes away the paralysis of feeling overwhelmed by all of the problems. There are so many problems that need addressing. And so if you can really apply it to the skills that you have and the focus that you're doing with your work and the available time and the resources that you have, then that does create change over time. Just keeping all of those things in mind as you're making those choices. I think that's a great answer.
Yeah. And I just like also big change coming here is like growing my first vegetable garden, and even just the satisfaction and being like, wow, like I can grow my own food, not all
magic.
Of it. I know. It's like magic, and it's like, oh my God, it was just in my backyard. Nothing needed to like really none of these things that normally goes into getting your food from the supermarket, none of that. I just did it all right here. And there's definitely like a sense of like, wow, like doing maybe this sounds so hunky-dory, but I'm like doing good things for the environment and for, whatever it's fun.
And I guess like the thing is, you moved to Maine and realized that you could do that, but you could have implemented that in Los Angeles too. So even if you feel like I can't leave the city, or I love the city and I don't want to leave, there are ways that you can implement those things in your life to improve it dramatically. And I think growing food is definitely high on that list.
Yes. And I think I made the mistake the first year of like trying to do everything. So like only like 10% of what I did is succeeded. But even just growing some like, I don't know, cilantro and other, like some herbs like that, there's definitely like a satisfaction, even if you're just doing a little bit of like feeling like you can like provide for yourself in a material way. And that, also just like, it's really, what better way is there to like reduce your footprint in your food, the food that you eat, and then growing it yourself. It's definitely, you don't have to do everything. You don't have to like become a homesteader and grow all your own food to just capture a little bit of that joy and satisfaction from doing that.
You're currently renting a house here. Do you have any advice for people when it comes to finding a house to rent or to buy when they move?
I'm so lucky that I met you, because you know everybody and you introduced me to my current landlord. But I think it goes along with that. Like if you only look online or like on a kind of like established websites to try to find places to rent, I didn't really have much luck doing that just because things are so limited. But getting to know people, that's like where you're going to find the things that aren't online, or like maybe aren't, not everybody wants to like go through some like a rental agency or whatever. The best way that I've found places to live that were really great and like had what I was looking for was just either word of mouth or like Facebook groups. And just like, there's certain people that you meet that just like, they know everybody and everything and they know what's going on and they'll hook you up. And I think, in some ways, I'm not sure in terms of like buying a house because I've not done that yet. But in terms of renting, it was just definitely just getting to know people and word of mouth, I found to be a lot easier to find places than to try to just, you gotta get personal.
Yeah. Well, even just calling up real estate agents and saying, hey, I'm not looking to buy. Maybe I will, in a couple years down the road, but I really want to get to know the area. I know people who've gotten, 6-month rentals out of that because someone will want to put their house on the market, but maybe they've already left and it's vacant, and, having a 6-month person there would actually be great. So there are just all of these different ways that you can kind of like find back doors, because sometimes when you go on Craigslist, actually, especially after the pandemic, I just feel like this area and a lot of other areas across rural America have filled up with people who've kind of left the city for permanent or a period of time.
I've heard it's much harder to find a place to buy right now, or even rent, especially like Maine is such a seasonal place that it is a little bit challenging to find temporary housing, especially during the summer, that wouldn't be at like an exorbitant like rental or like vacation rental price. But I think, like you said, just like if you kind of get to know people and make your intentions known, I think like you'll find something hopefully through that way, rather than only looking, in places like, I don't know, the local newspaper or things.
So 2020 was really hard on so many levels. What did this difficult time teach you, and how are you carrying those lessons into the work and process of 2021?
Well, like, I think first off, it's like, I'm just coming from a place of like, yes, 2020 was a hard year, but it's like, I also, I didn't suffer a lot of the things that many, many people suffered. I didn't know anybody who had coronavirus. I kept my job. I'm lucky because it was a year of a lot of introspection and, yes, challenging emotionally in a lot of ways, but like just feel really really grateful that for kind of like all the blessings that I have, despite all of really the difficult times that people have faced during COVID. But I think having a lot of this time for me, and I think for a lot of people, is some ways a blessing in disguise, because you can't hide from yourself for like a year. You can't hide from things that you're going through, things that you like, sometimes being around other people can distract you from. I think this year kind of has like really opened me up to be creative in a way where I'm like just doing it for myself and giving myself purpose, even though I'm not having as much of those like exciting external, friends, gatherings, working in person, all those things. It was like, it really gave me a lot of time to, I guess, work on my relationship, work on myself, really want to understand my flaws and all the things kind of keeping me from doing what I want to do in my life. And, I started working on a creative project that I would have never done because I was just telling myself that, I couldn't do it. And I don't know why. I feel good that I was able to like move through a lot of, I'm still learning, but, move through a lot of like self-defeating patterns that I might have gotten caught up in.
A friend of mine said, you have to be courageous now.
Yeah.
And she's like, all of the curtains have been dropped, and you just have to be you. Maybe this is just like this tiny little vantage point, but I think a lot of people are really fed up with pretending that everything's okay and that we're all good and that we don't have to go and follow our dreams and that we can't achieve those dreams. But really, it's just like taking little bites of it every day. That's how you work towards something.
Yes. Like, instead of just being like, it's all or nothing now, what can you spend 20 minutes a day doing that's like forwarding your goals or that makes you happy? Because it's like, life's too short. That's what this year is like. it has been a reminder of is like, you know, life is precious and you can't hide forever. And in that way, it's been helpful in terms of like moving beyond the victim mindset and moving into like the proactive like mindset.
Is there anything that you want to leave people with at the end of this conversation? Any advice for people who maybe they are just like you? Maybe they left college and they actually got into the career that they wanted, and they got there and they just realized, oh my gosh, like I feel so unhappy and this doesn't feel right. Or maybe they moved to the city and they didn't get into the career that they want and they're feeling the exact same way. What advice would you give them on steps that they can take to tap into that voice and figure out what it's trying to tell them?
I think like, you know, for me, it was hard because, you know, there's the outside world telling you what you need to do, how you need to live your life in order to succeed and be happy. And I would say it's really empowering to just like tap into what does that actually mean for you, and trying. And I think another challenge is like also for me, like is getting stuck in like a victim mindset, or like the mindset where it's like, I can't do this, I can't do that. Maybe you can't make the big move, but like maybe, you know, you can control whatever you can control in your life, work towards that, even if it's just baby steps, even if it's just putting more money in your savings account, reaching out to, you know, people or places. Getting stuck and then getting yourself unstuck is like a perpetual life pattern, I've noticed. And like it takes a lot of courage and, you know, also like a lot of, you know, having to accept uncertainty and accept that things might not work out in order to like do the things that bring you happiness and bring you joy. And I think, I don't know, life is too short to like to tell yourself that you can't do things, that you don't deserve what you want.
When you come right down to it, just live your life well and be good to others, right?
Yes, exactly. Like there's a power that comes from listening to yourself and just doing things from a place of, I forget what I feel like you said this before. You said like not to do things from a place of rejection or fear, but making choices in an affirmative, positive way is a huge difference. And like for, you know, I think I'm paraphrasing you, but like for people who want to move to the country, it's good to come at it from a positive place of like, of love and like trying and searching and like creating and building the life that you want, versus a place of rejection, even though there might be that there, a place of rejecting the other life. If that is your focus, it can be harder to step into like building and creating a new place and space for yourself. So
I don't think that you're paraphrasing me. I think that's all you. Like, that sounds really good. Yes, Simone. Well, it has been such a pleasure to speak with you. And we've talked about this, and we'll see what the future holds for our schedules combined. But we've talked about maybe, you know, in a future season, maybe it's next season, maybe it's a season after, maybe it's you come in and out. But I really appreciate your perspective. You are 12 years younger than me. So you're really kind of like the next generation of people. And you moved a couple of years. Well, I was a couple of years older than you when I moved. But I just think that there are a lot of people out there that feel the way that you do, or the way that you did. And so I think maybe we'll speak about things more in the future, but I really appreciate your perspective on things and how thoughtful you are about the choices in your life. And thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks, Alyssa. It was really great to talk to you.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with Simone Leon. I am so grateful that our paths crossed because of Urban Exodus. The fuel that feeds this passion project has been meeting people like Simone, who have been emboldened to take a leap to a healthier lifestyle because they found the website and they were inspired by the stories of others who had made positive changes in their lives. Without Simone, I probably would have never had the courage to start this podcast. And I really look forward to future collaborations with this incredibly intelligent and hardworking woman. And I really look forward to seeing what Simone and her partner build for themselves here in Maine. You can find a link to photographs from our tour of Simone's home and a link to her partner Simon's music by visiting our blog at urbanexodus.com. Hi, friends. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Urban Exodus podcast. Urban Exodus is a labor of love, and it's only made possible by your generous support. Maybe you just discovered Urban Exodus, or maybe you followed the project for a long time. Either way, please consider supporting my efforts so I can keep this going. The first and easiest way is to click the support button at the top of urbanexodus.com and pledge any amount you like. Second, sponsor an episode of the podcast as a business or individual and get a 20-second ad spot in an upcoming episode. Just click the podcast link on urbanexodus.com to learn more. Third, you can sign up for an in-person or online workshop with me or one of the incredible creative professionals through our workshops at How Hill Farm. Click the workshops page on urbanexodus.com to learn more. Fourth, you can buy something from Jake.art, our new Urban Exodus online shop. A fine art print or wall art for your home or office. A custom illustration or portrait of your family or loved one. There are so many cool things. Just click the shop page to peruse what's available. Lastly, you can hire me to photograph your business or family, or take one of my online or destination workshops. Click the collaborations page on urbanexodus.com to learn more. Another really excellent way to support is to recommend Urban Exodus to your friends and relations. Also by giving a 5-star ratings on iTunes to beat the algorithm and so that we can be more easily searchable. Your continued support will keep this passion project running. I want anyone who feels unfulfilled by career or circumstance to know that they have options and alternatives. All of the work that I do through this project is to encourage people to believe in themselves and to work towards a better future for their community and the planet. Thank you for helping me continue to do this work. You can find Urban Exodus on Instagram and Facebook at The Urban Exodus. To read more in-depth features on folks who ditched the city and went country, visit urbanexodus.com. Until next time, I'm Alyssa Hessler, and this is The Urban Exodus.